So, you've just started playing Beasts of Bermuda and you want to play the Oryctodromeus. Well, I have just two questions for you. Do you like pocket sand?
Pocket sand.
And do you like running around at the speed of sound?
Rolling around at the speed of sound. Got places to go, gotta follow my rainbow.
If so, then Oryctodromeus, the digging runner, is for you. Ori's base stats at 1.0 are 125 health, 100 ability, 120 stamina, 75 weight, and 800 sprint speed. Fairly weak base stats due to its small size. It isn't really built to be a fighter, although you are able to fight some creatures when you get large or with the right talents invested. As well as this, 800 sprint speed is pretty middle of the road for sprint speeds, faster than Acro and Ichthy's sprint speed, but still slower than Rex, Velo, Megalo, and Megaraptors. After the recent changes to growth time, it takes around 90 minutes to fully grow to 1.2. Ori gameplay is a ton of fun. It's very hectic, involves a lot of running around. You're playing the smallest, weakest dinosaur in the game, stat-wise. As such, the second you spot any predator, unless you're pretty big or have some kind of suicidal tendencies, you're gonna turn and sprint the other direction or make a mad dash to your nearest burrow. This can lead to some pretty crazy adventures running around the map, and even though you're pretty small, you can even get some combat use. Your Sandblast attack, it can be very, very helpful CC when you're in herds, especially against velos and flyers. When you aren't running for your life or eating and drinking, most of your time as Ori is spent underground in burrows, which is probably the most unique gameplay mechanic that Ori has. When you play Ori, if you hold your ability keybind, which is Z by default, you'll create a burrow entrance. Pressing E on this entrance, there will be a short channel, which can be further shortened with talents, and you will enter inside your burrow. When inside, you will see an icon on the top left of your screen. This means that you are in your tunneling stance. While in this stance, you cannot attack. Instead, your left click will allow you to begin to dig in a given direction, clearing out a single block of dirt. Each block you excavate will be added to the gauge on the left side of your screen. When this gauge is filled completely, you cannot dig any further. You can lower this gauge by pressing right click, which will fill in a block with dirt, or by exiting your burrow, which will fully empty the gauge completely. Holding left or right click will highlight which block you are going to dig out or fill in respectively. Overall, Ori's burrowing is really fun, even though it can be pretty buggy and somewhat restrictive. It's basically playing Minecraft in Beasts of Bermuda. It's really fun to make super expansive Ori burrows that span over vast distances. Do be careful though. If you dig too far from a burrow entrance, you'll receive the stale air debuff, which substantially decreases your comfort level and could very easily kill your Ori. This also applies if you seal yourself off from a burrow entrance or if it gets blocked off by a log or rock. As well as this, burrows despawn after 72 hours of inactivity. Pressing X will switch your Ori into attack stance. This functions the same as regular Ori with your standard attacks and allows you to attack while underground. You see, while underground, most creatures receive a debuff called claustrophobia, which reduces their damage by 50%. A few creatures can minimize this effect with the talent Vigilance. Ori, the burrower that it is the only dinosaur in the game that does not receive this debuff and does full damage while underground. This makes Vigilance not a super useful talent on Ori, since all it does is increase your view distance while underground, which is already fairly high by default. Ori's gameplay is probably one of the most unique in the game at the moment. There isn't really anything quite like it currently. You aren't really focused on combat. You're not spending hours and hours in the Beast of Bermuda Discord arguing over why Apado is OP this patch, or why Acro needs to be nerfed, or why semi-aquatics are worthless to the game, or any other random bullshit. You're just Ori. You know, you sit in your burrow, you find fucking cucumbers to eat. It's simultaneously super hectic, but also really chill. Especially if you're digging yourself a huge burrow that you can just lie down in. There are points where it feels like a totally different game. Ori's gameplay feels a lot more interactive and engaging than the standard herbivore gameplay, which typically involves AFKing at a single body of water until you drain it or the water goes bad, and the occasional migration every 2 hours to a new AFK spot. Ori's left click is a low damage peck attack. This is your basic attack. It costs 6.5 ability on use and does 25 base damage and a pitiful 0.123 injury. Ori's white. Ori's white. Ori's white. Ori is not white. Sorry. Ori's right click is Pocket Sand. It costs 35 ability on use, throws sand behind you, slows sprint speed by 40%, disables jumping, and grounds flyers. Sandblast has diminishing returns, something that was introduced a few patches ago, much like many of the active abilities on dinos like Cychania and Acrocanthosaurus. This means that the second consecutive time you land a sand attack on the same creature, it will only last 50% of the duration. The third time will only last 25%. After 3 consecutive sandblasts, the targeted creature is immune for 18 seconds. For counters, Ori doesn't necessarily counter anything in particular since it isn't really designed to be hunting or killing anything. However, if I had to choose, I would probably say Terra and Tropy, because with certain builds you can become really powerful against some dinos. Pairing talents like Bruiser and Wing Tear can make Ori really good against Flyer. Pairing both of these together, you do a huge amount of injury damage to them, making it really difficult for them to take off again unless they've heavily invested in the speed tree. This is made all the easier by your right click, which literally grounds all flyers. However, even then, you have to be a pretty big sized Ori to actually be able to kill flyers once you ground them. More often than not, you'll utilize your Sandblast to help slow down attackers for your own self-preservation, or so that other stronger herd members can come in and kill them. So you're like simultaneously a counter to nothing, but also like a counter to everything, because pretty much every single dino in the game will suffer if they receive a 40% movement reduction, or the inability to jump or fly. Like, that shit hurts. For counters to Ori, I'd say there are 3 big ones: Acro, Velo, and Megaraptor. Acro is a big counter to Ori, and most of the reasons why it's a counter apply to the talent Exhausting Bite as a whole. You see, because you're wanting to run away from stuff as Ori because it's typically really hard to fight things one-on-one, anything that reduces or removes your stamina is going to be a pretty big counter, because it makes it harder for you to escape from predators. Acro Z-Call and Exhausting Bite are currently the only things in the game that actually do this, therefore they're pretty obvious counters to Ori. Velo is a counter to Ori mainly because it's probably one of the few things that would actually actively hunt you and are a common threat to you. In general, Velos are just kind of all around better than Oris in terms of stats. They have the same health and ability, with more stamina, more base damage, and slightly higher speed. This makes a 1v1 really difficult on land, so try to avoid Velos at all costs on land. The only time when you really have an advantage against Velos is in your burrows, because you don't receive the damage nerf from claustrophobia that Velos and all other dinos get. Use this to your advantage, so you're able to outdamage the Velo and kill it, or stick together in large groups of Oris so that you can outnumber the Velos if they try to attack. For Megaraptor, Oris are really vulnerable when outside their burrows, so it goes without saying that the dinosaur with the highest base sprint speed in the game is really dangerous if you get caught out away from any burrows. If you get spotted by a Megaraptor while out in the open, try to land a Sandblast and make a quick dash to your burrow. If you see a pack of Megaraptors, just say your prayers and hope they don't want to eat you because of how small you are. For builds, speed is typically the foundation for any Ori build. Because Ori has a fairly average land speed, talents like sure-footed, strong legs, and especially swiftness are essential for almost any Ori build. Getting talents like long runner, endurance, and powerful legs can help with traversing the map as well. And of course, Swift Claws is one of the best talents for Ori, allowing it not only to dig faster, but to also enter and exit burrows at a much faster speed, which is one of the most vulnerable times for Ori since you are unable
unable to cancel the channel as soon as you activate it. However, Ori builds can be very diverse. There are a lot of talents all across the web that are really excellent, and some even necessary on Ori. And because it grows so quickly, it's really easy to grow large enough to be able to have multiple points in all 3 trees. For survival talents, Sturdy is an excellent talent all around on Ori. It makes it so any damage that would kill you instead leaves you at very low HP. Having 3 out of 3 or even 5 out of 3 in Sturdy is amazing on Ori because it increases the threshold of damage you can take and still survive. As well as this, talents that make you all around beefier, stuff like Constitution and Healing, are both very helpful if you decide to fight some Velas or something. Botanist is another very interesting talent. On most creatures, it's pretty useless. However, it can be quite helpful on Ori, allowing you to get more food from the different plants that you uncover in your burrows, meaning that you don't need to go up to the surface for food nearly as much as you would without it. For combat talents, I've already talked about Bruiser and Wingtear, but they are really quite helpful. As well as this, Ori is the only true herbivore that has access to the Sharp Teeth talent. Koa is an omnivore, so it doesn't really count, which is really easy to proc on Ori because of its small size and weight. Sand Hoarder increases the duration of your pocket sand and can give you more sand attacks if you want to play more aggressively, but don't forget about the diminishing returns on your right click. Persistence and Brawler are typically good picks on most dinos, and the same can be said for Ori, increasing your base damage and abilities pool respectively. If you plan on building massive, extensive burrow systems, you might want to invest in Burrowmaster as well. Not only does this increase the number of entrances and exits you can have in your burrows, as well as the amount of dirt you can carry, but it also allows you to pick up and interact with the different objects that you will discover in your burrows. This includes edible and non-edible ones. So yeah, go play Ori.